Hello and welcome to the Idea Spot at Raisina Dialogue 2025. I'm Lavanya and I'm a fellow at ORF. Today we have a very interesting session for you, leadership in a crisis. Whether it's politics or business, the ability of a leader to navigate a crisis is critical. We've seen many crises unfold in recent years, whether it's COVID pandemic, political upheavals, economic instabilities, wars, or climate disasters. These moments not only test our systems, but the ability of our leaders to help us through these difficult times, because the consequences are immense. Today, I have with me Dr. Jemma King, who's a research fellow at the University of Queensland, who's also the external advisor to McKinsey Australia and the founder of BPA. Thank you, Jemma, for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here in India, my first time.
Thank you. So we can jump right into the main question, which is, what are the essential traits in an effective leader in a time of crisis?
Yeah, this is a really good question, and I've had the privilege of working with many leaders in crises or high stress environments, be that military or, people leading teams into the Olympic Games, or CEOs from global organisations. And when I look at, there are some three distinct characteristics which I feel are critical for good leadership. And the first one, which I think is quite underestimated how important this first one is, and it is the notion of self-leadership. In order to lead others, you must first lead yourself. So this is understanding what we call psychophysiology. So this is how your brain and your body interact under pressure, and therefore changes your behaviour, your perceptions, how people perceive you, and your decision making. And so what we really want in a leader in crisis is someone who has emotional stability and who is consistent. You don't want inconsistencies or unreliability. You're actually better off being an ill-tempered, consistent leader rather than, unpredictable. And so in order to have the ability to lead yourself, you must pay attention to things like your sleep, how you eat, how you interact with others, who is in your inner circle, are they trusted? And then you can have some kind of emotional stability. And that creates poise, and therefore people who see you, they want to follow you, they want to be like you, and they trust you. So that comes to my second point, is the notion of benevolence. So people will go and work really hard and act and go that further mile if they can see that that leader genuinely and deeply cares about them as a person. And in order to do this, you have to create something called psychological safety. And we know that this is one of the the most important factors of high-performing teams. It's literally, just group trust. And there are certain preconditions, necessary preconditions, that you must have in order to create psychological safety within your team. And it's kind of counterintuitive, but you have to have conflict. But the type of conflict is very important. In order to maintain trust, and so people know that you benevolently care about them, the conflict must be around tasks. So that's how you can disagree without being disagreeable, as opposed to personal conflict, which is, disagreeing and being disagreeable. Because people cannot truly trust you unless they know how you fight. You could be completely loco, right? So actually conflict is very important in fostering trust, psychological safety, and that people know that you care about them. Because if you have conflict with them with their tasks, you say, I am telling you this because you need to know how to do this in the future. You create a future belonging indicator that you are part of us, you're part of the team, I care about your future. And so that's how you can moderate difficult conflict around tasks. The last one is very important. I think everyone knows a leader has to be smart. You have to have an ability to understand the complexity of the environment that you're working in. And I think what's really important is leaders have to introduce a notion called contributory dissent. So you have to ask those in your echo chamber, why am I wrong? Why is this a different perspective from those people. And you actually have to listen to people who do not agree with you and respect people's perspectives. And you have to have the cognitive flexibility to be able to hold potentially two disparate concepts together in the one skull and not be conflicted by it. Intellectual curiosity, intellectual humility. Leaders these days can never expect to know everything. The technological advances are so extreme that as a leader you have to have the humility to say, I don't know who in my team knows about this. And we know there's been many catastrophes where leaders have had this high power distance and their subordinates have been too frightened to speak up to them. So, those are my three ones: self-leadership, benevolence, and ability.
So you made a great point about group trust. Now, if we have to extrapolate this to a political setup, the audience that political leaders cater to is vast and uncontrolled. So how can political leaders then build trust or position themselves as trustworthy in a crisis situation? Like, how do you create that morale amongst public when in the midst of a crisis?
So the notion of morale is really important. I think this is one of the primary objectives of good leadership, is to get people to do hard things in hard situations that they may not necessarily want to do. And in some situations, putting their life on the line and living in, austere environments. And so I have a 3-point formula for creating morale in people who are dealing with difficult things. So first thing a leader must do is they must show deep appreciation for the sacrifices that their leaders are giving, that their efforts are seen. And you have to almost empathise with them, so I understand that you are in pain right now and you are suffering and it's hard. And so you see the sacrifices, number one. Number two is that you have to remind people of the higher order meaning and purpose as to why they're doing this. So you're always having to elevate up about, we have shared adversity, we have a shared goal, we are together in this. People can do amazing things when they feel like they have a collective, they have people behind them and a shared collective purpose. And then the third one is, as a leader, this is probably the hardest one, you have to instill hope. Right. So you have to talk about, an idealised future, that yes, things are hard, things are tough, but if we stick together and we do the right thing, this is the potential. And so that is that charismatic leadership. That is that visionary leadership, that we will get there in the future. And you have to punctuate everything you say and preface everything you say with the appreciation, the higher purpose, and the hope. And I think that's the best way to create morale. And then you asked about trust. So I think you cannot beat consistency. Like, you need to demonstrate consistency, ability and benevolence. And I think what a lot of leaders do when they're in high-octane, intense environments with people who may be quite hostile, they believe that they should come in sounding very competent and give the facts and the data, and I do this and I know this, where actually what people want is warmth. There's a great paper from a Harvard professor, Amy Cuddy, who talks about the importance of warmth versus competence. So if you want to engage and ingratiate trust, you come in with warmth, with likeness, with shared values, with a perspective that I know you, I like you, I feel like we are on the same page. Therefore, I will then listen to whether or not you're competent or not. But you have to placate people's primitive brains, like, A, first, are they dangerous? B, are they like me? Right. And then C, are you useful? That is why, as a leader, you should never say something of critical importance in the first 2 minutes of an important meeting. Wow. Because people's brains have to be given the chance to scan you, and their brains go through those 3 questions. Are you a threat? Are you like me? Are you similar? Do we have similar values? And only then will they listen to you, and they will ascertain, are you useful for me? So don't come in saying, we should do this, we should do that. You need that social lubrication. You need that time, give people time to make their brains down-regulate and then listen to you.
Yeah. No, those are some great points. I feel like you've answered my next question, which was what kind of leaders do people want to listen and follow? And you made some great points. Predictable, empathetic, charismatic. And I think...
real, authentic. I think that people want to know, like, you want to have a leader that's quite, like, slightly aspirational. Yeah. Like they demonstrate dispositions and traits that you aspire to and you want to be like. Yeah. But they're not too far away that they're like, oh, I will never be like that. So that you have to have a bit of realness, a bit of ruggedness, a bit of... I think authenticity. You know, if you make a mistake, self-correct and use it as a learning opportunity, not pretend to be like it was somebody else's fault. Yeah. Like, be authentic.
So, while being authentic, I think one thing that we're seeing in the global leadership landscape is that there is a fundamental shift in what kind of leaders are coming to power. Yeah. And there is a bit of, a gray area whether leaders are empathetic or too candid, predictable or unpredictable, and it's all morphed up at this point. Yeah. So how do you perceive this fundamental shift? Do you see that different kind of leaders are now appealing to audiences and therefore they're coming to power? Why is that happening? What do you think about it?
Yeah, I think there's like the pendulum swung. Mm-hmm. Where there was that more of that, servant, empathetic leadership, and there's been a bit of a swing towards like a strongman leadership. I think it's very contextual. Like this works in some areas that there's a necessity for strong, hard decisions to be made. There is so much uncertainty. There's a lot of danger out there for many nations. But I think what a great leader does is oscillates their leadership style in conjunction with the situation that faces them. So, for instance, if you are in a situation where you need to be a directive, authoritative leadership because you don't have time to be consultative. So, for example, say we're at this conference and then we hear that somebody has Ebola, right? You need an authoritative, decisive leader that will shut down and make the hard decisions immediately. Where, on the other hand, if you hear that there's Ebola in a distant nation, you then can have a different type of leadership style, consultative, deliberative. You think about all the different, possibilities. And so a really good leader is the leader that can go from here to here and then know that their followers will trust that they are choosing the correct leadership style for that moment. So I think you need to be incredibly flexible as a leader. You can't just be one way because you'll disenfranchise a lot of people. There's so much disparity because of the advent of social media. Yeah. You have no idea someone's political orientation. Like all of the typical lines of like, you see this person, they went to that school, they were from that socioeconomic background, they're that religion, they look like this, therefore they must think this. That's gone, right? We have no idea. You can probably look at their algorithm on their phone and probably ascertain what their political orientation is. But without doing that, we don't know who you are leading anymore.
Yeah. So you made a very interesting point about social media and how leaders are perceived because of social media. And there are two kinds of views that people tend to have. One is, hey, leaders are more accessible today, and I know what to make of certain leaders' tweets. But how do you? And the other views, of course, that there's leaders can rant sometimes on social media. So how seriously do we take these words?
It is so murky. Yeah. The misinformation, the disinformation that's being propagated on social media, AI-generated videos, it's terrifying. I think there needs to be something has to be done about AI, and that the concept of truth is gone. There is no truth anymore. We only have consensus. So what we know is that leaders these days, that what will win the war, win the hearts and minds of people, is that they can convince people listening that their version of the truth is more true than that other person's version of the truth, right? Truth no longer exists. And so this is why, I think this is incredibly important, and people are not talking about this enough. But all leaders should be asking themselves the question, what should we be doing? What should we be training, fostering and looking at when the marginal cost of IQ is dropping to zero. From a 4-star general to a street sweeper, you can have AI, generated information at your fingertips. The ability to have incredibly intelligent agents with IQs over 400 at your fingertips means that the competitive advantage of having a PhD or having a professor or having this knowledge is gone. Yeah. So what's left? Yeah. What is left for us? What is left for leaders? What should we be doing? Yeah. And I believe we should be putting a lot of investment in the human factors, social dynamics, emotional intelligence, because those things, AI is not so good at, it's catching up. Yeah. And so we need those soft skills. I don't know why they're called soft skills, because they're quite hard for some men, particularly. But we need those soft skills more than ever to create relationships, to create bonds between nations, to understand people's, perspectives, what motivates them. These are the human skills that we need to be fostering, because intelligence is now free. Yeah. And we need friends. We need alliances. Yeah. We need psychological safety. And when you think about, really, when you break down what is really going on in the world, we have a nation state against a nation state. You have a military against a military. You have a general, a leader against a leader. But what we really do have is a very primitive human neuron banging up against another very primitive human neuron, right? When you strip everything away, that's all it is. It's a human against a human. Yeah. So what are the skills that we need to foster and develop? Yeah. Emotional intelligence is key. That's the only thing that's going to get us through, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Just to wrap it up, how do you, I know you highlighted EQ as a critical factor, and I think that's much needed in leaders today. But how do you see leadership play out in the coming years? How do you think global leadership is going to shape up?
Yeah, I think it's going to be relation-based. And I think leaders really need to look at what is the amount of trust? Who is advising them? Can you trust them? Are they in an echo chamber? Are they getting sufficient information? And I think, psychological safety and trust and contributory dissent is important. So, for instance, I was speaking to a person who was doing research with a thoracic surgeon. And, some of these surgeons are very frightening for those who are working around them. Right. And this nurse inside the emergency room, inside the operating room, was so terrified of that leader or that surgeon that she watched that surgeon sew up a pair of scissors into the thoracic cavity of that patient, right? So I use this as an analogy. All the leaders out there, how many of you have got people in your team that are allowing you, metaphorically, to sew scissors into chest cavities? Yeah. Okay? You need to have truthful, honest, candid, probably not so good information being fed to you on a regular basis. And if you don't, you can sew scissors into people's rib cages. Yeah. And I think and so leaders need to have really good emotional intelligence going forward.